it comes to good storytelling, I think it starts with a good project or a good subject. And it always makes me feel good when I come across a project that really gets me excited. When it comes to this one, even though the tasks to be done are very simple, I was really excited to get started on it to get to the end result. And I hope that comes across by the end of this video. In this video, I'm going to be taking a 6-foot long floating shelf, over 2-inch thick piece of what I believe is black walnut. And I'm not sure about that, so please correct me in the comments if you know what the wood is. I'm going to try to bring it back to life. My customer said that this piece of wood sat on the side of a friend's home out in the elements, and it had seen better days. You'll see that it is in pretty rough shape, from the previous holes that were used to mount it to weather elements that really tore it up. From scratches and dents and holes and scrapes and dings to some of the natural parts of the wood that were preserved from the time it got cut. And you can see right here that the previous sealant job was unfortunately not done well, and a bunch of it ran down the side of the piece of wood. We're going to take care of all of that and really get this thing looking good again. I want to start on the top, and this is going to be a simple process. I'm going to have my orbital sander, and after doing a lot of research, I'm going to use some of the best sandpaper out there, at least from what I've read on the internet. I'll be using 3M Cubitron Mark II, I guess, and this comes with 15 pads ranging from 80 grit all the way up to 220 grit. I'll get more into how it performed in a little bit, but from what I read online, this is some of the best sandpaper you can buy. So my goal was to use the best quality tools to get this wood looking brand new again. But to get it started and to really take off the top of this what used to be, I'm going to start with 80 and see what we can do. Talking from an experience of using this type of pad, which I have used mainly Diablo pads from Home Depot in the past, the swirl or the slight curve of the smaller holes is interesting. But what I can say is that this pad works very, very fast, and it gives you a very clean sand, ripping off uneven parts of previous finish, or just taking a raw piece of wood that may not have been finished and getting it to a smoother state. This was a shot from my cell phone. Once I went for a few minutes, the marks that used to be there to where it was after about 20-25 minutes of sanding, it was already looking really good. But I mean, it very quickly made a huge difference. I would say this pad, just one 80 grit pad, I went for about 45 minutes straight. And I still think I could have used it longer, but I ended up switching it out for a new one. And you can see here in real time how quickly it just rips right through this previous sealant. For a new product I've never used before, I was very, very happy with the results. And again, I would highly recommend, if you have any sort of project where you need to sand a lot, look at these pads. They were actually very reasonable, 15 pads for about 10 bucks. Probably the most challenging thing about this project was the sanding, which took about 5 hours in total. I will say too that I love having this little blower just to use in between coats. And you can see that the sand wasn't perfect, but it made a huge difference when it came to just getting rid of that top layer of just gunk. Already the wood looks so much better. Like, so I can't even tell you, the video does not do it justice. Now that I'm happy with the top part, which took me about 2 hours or so, I'm gonna try to focus on the bottom. I wouldn't say I didn't put as much focus into the bottom, but you won't see that as much. So if I put 110% into the top, I probably put 90 into the bottom. But this knot right here, or this part that sticks out, was probably the most challenging part to sand. And a little bit later, you're going to see that I made quite a big change just to kind of help me out. But I don't have any smaller special tools to help me get in those gaps other than literally sanding it by hand, which I really did want to do because I knew this was going to take me a long time to sand. So I did my best with my orbital sander, and it did a good job, but there was just some areas that I had a really hard time getting to. So after a little bit, I ended up just leaving it as is. I focused on the rest of the bottom, and I came back to it, I believe, the next day. I decided on a little bit of a scene change. This was a little bit further over in my yard. It was a beautiful day to be outside sanding. As much as I would say sanding is kind of boring and it's not my favorite thing to do, it was very enjoyable to watch this thing come back to life. And even though it wasn't finished, just getting rid of all those imperfections. I mean, this is a beautiful piece of wood. Did I mention that it was over 6 feet long? That's a pretty big piece of wood, if I had to say so myself. And on top of that, it's a floating shelf. I mean, this thing is a beast. I would say it's roughly, if I were to guess, about 40 pounds. So you'll see later in the video, I purchased fairly heavy duty mounting brackets. I don't know what this is, but it kind of reminds me of router marks. But my goal is to get rid of it because it looks really bad. This is only about 10 minutes of sanding, and you can see look how quickly it just went away. I mean, it's just, there's a much more of a curve now, but like, I'm okay with that. So you can see kind of how deep that is. I would say it was probably like not quite a quarter of an inch, but close. And now it's completely, I mean, the difference is amazing. Stuff like that makes me really happy. So now I went back and I tried to focus on this little area, and it was killing me. Like, this was very difficult to sand, and I was getting kind of frustrated, and I wasn't really sure how to deal with this. So I decided to make kind of a big change, but one that I think really benefited the piece of wood and will also help in a practical sense. I decided to pull out my Japanese pool saw and cut this piece of wood in the contour of that area. So you can see it kind of goes up and out, and then it kind of contours back in. So I tried to follow that line. And I will say, because this is hardwood, this thing was really difficult to cut. I would say it took me about 10 to 15 minutes just to cut all the way through it. And I had to stop multiple times because my hands were hurting. But I got through it. I think it was for the best that I cut it off. I'm pretty happy with that, and it'll make the sanding of the area much easier. And of course, the goal with the sanding in this area was to kind of leave the imprint of what was there, but still follow the contour of this area that's sticking out. But it's just not as kind of extreme as it was before. Now that I'm done with that, I can move on to the other grits, and this is going to be very simple. I used 150, 180, and 220. I felt like that should have been enough to get through this to where I wanted it to be. I spent about 10 minutes on each of these grits going from one side to the other. And when I was done with that, I moved on to the next grit, and then of course the next grit. So after about 30 minutes, I could use the blower to clean it all off, and then I could flip it over and do the same steps on the bottom. Sometimes it's nice to just stand back and admire a piece of work like that. And it's nothing that really I did other than my time, but it's a beautiful piece of wood. I've found that it's very easy to rush these kind of things and to want to get through like sanding quickly because I want to get to the final product. But what I also found is that when you really have the right tools and you take your time and you do it the right way, the product will always come out much better. So you might not have that issue. That might just be a me thing, but keep that in mind in the future if you encounter that yourself. This is the part that I had been looking forward to since I originally found out that I was going to take on this project. What I'm doing right now is I'm just mainly cleaning off the extra sawdust and whatnot that was left over on this piece of wood before I put the sealant on it. But also I wanted to check and see if the grain would pop at all, and then if I need to do any final sanding, which I really didn't because it was very, very smooth after I went over it with the 220 grit. Again, in my research, wanting to use the 3M sandpaper, I also wanted to make sure I got a really, really great protectant. And my choice for this, after a lot of research, was Osmo Wood Wax Finish. From what I've read online, again, like the sandpaper, supposedly, correct me if I'm wrong, this is some of the best stuff you can buy for finishing wood. Now, this is good for flooring, really, I guess, any situation, but I think their big seller for this stuff is actually flooring. But you'll see pretty quickly that this stuff is really nice. It goes on super easy. You can brush it or apply other ways. And it's just an oil-based finish, so you just get it on there. It actually did say you don't have to do heavy coats, but I would say I went in the middle. It wasn't super heavy, but I really wanted it to soak into the wood. You let it sit there for 30 minutes, and then you just wipe off the excess. Very, very simple. If you do these kind of projects, you already know this, but one of the best things about them is watching them come to life as you apply the finish or the sealant. So I went through and I applied this once, let it sit for 30 minutes, wiped off the extra, and then I did it a second time. And then once that was dry, I flipped it over. I did the same on the bottom with 2 coats, 30 minutes of rest in between, and then wiping off any excess oil. Now, I didn't want to show you the whole thing completely finished because I want to save that for the reveal at the end. But we're going to take this to my customer, who is a very good family friend of ours. And I'm excited to say that this was a really fun one. And in all honesty, I'm a little bit jealous because I would love to keep this wood for myself. But it is a beautiful piece of wood that I'm happy to bring back to life for her. So I finally arrived at the customer's house. This is pretty straightforward, and I'm not really going to go into detail, but just to give some high points, I found the center point on that wall, and I went through and I found each stud to figure out which ones I wanted to put the brackets on, even though I ended up only using 2 and on the furthest studs from each other, mainly because it was kind of the cleanest setup. But once I got them mounted and I had the piece of wood on it, which you'll see in just a moment here, it actually was much more sturdy than I thought it was going to be. I think I was kind of nervous going into this, but once I found where the studs were and the ones I wanted to use, I spoke with Kelly and we figured out the height she would like to have the mounts at. And because I was going into the studs, I was much more confident with the holding strength. One thing I would suggest is always have a level with you and constantly check for square and plumb. So once I had that in place, I grabbed my 6-foot level and I checked for level between the 2, and then I was able to mark the holes for the next mount. Of course, once I had that screwed in place, all I had to do was put the piece of wood on top and then screw it all down. I was happy when I saw that the bubble was right in the middle and everything was nice and level. This shelf will be strong and sturdy and will stay in the same place for many years. After I was done with that, I asked Kelly to come over and do a quick reveal, so check out what she said.
Ooh, look how nice!
Do you remember what it used to look like?
Yes! Wow! Look at the grain and the wood.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
So I wanted to share a few things that I think I would have done differently if I had started this project over to finish this piece of wood. The first thing I would have done is maybe added 1 or 2 more coats of oil. I don't know that it necessarily needed more, but I think it might have helped just to give it a little bit more richness. Not necessary, but could have been helpful. This is another one I don't know that was necessary because reading the directions on the back of the can of Osmo, it did not say that you had to sand in between coats, but I do think if I had used maybe like a 400 grit sandpaper in between, it might have helped just a little bit. It is very, very soft and smooth, but there are some areas that are like slightly rough. And when I say slightly rough, they really aren't that rough, but it could have been helpful. I think I would have used some black epoxy to fill in all the holes and the cracks in just the natural parts of the wood that were a little rough. I think that could have kind of just gave it a bit more of a finished look. Again, you could go either way with that. Like the natural rough look isn't bad, but there are a lot of holes, a lot of little things. Not a big deal. Just, something I might have done. And then the last thing I think I might have done that I didn't do this time is kept the piece of wood for myself. And I say that jokingly, but I'm really happy it came out well. Kelly, thank you again for giving me this opportunity. I hope that you enjoy the shelf because you will get the chance to look at it every day. And for those of you who watched this video to the end, and I just want to let you know that I appreciate it. If you liked it and you're not subscribed, consider subscribing for future content like this. And last but not least, don't forget to use what you got. See you guys in the next one.